Is that right, please?
ICC.
You have 10 minutes. Good to see you.
So we're looking at 30 years.
Yeah. Now, press again, mate. It's got to be green. Good on you.
Atamarie, my name is Hannah. I hope you all had a lovely and safe summer break. Thank you for this opportunity to share our thoughts and ideas on the Council's adaptation plan for Whakaropo and Kokoarata, Port Levy. Today we are representing the collective feedback from a group of 11 children and young people aged 11 to 16 years old from the Next Generation Conversation, better known as NGC. We have been meeting voluntary for over 3 years now and representing ourselves, not a school. We are a dedicated, loyal group focused on climate change action and education.
Kia ora. My name is Ollie. You may have heard of us before. We have provided feedback on a number of your plans already, including the Coastal Hazards Framework and, more recently, Accelerating Adaptation Planning and the Community Resilience Fund in the long-term plan. We are happy to hear that both were supported and are going ahead. Thank you. To shape our feedback today, we thought we would briefly share our key values and what is important to us as a team. They include diversity, equity, respect, kindness, communication, and listening, considering, and working with the natural environment and all living things.
And now to our feedback. Firstly, thank you for doing such a great job on the engagement. We found the brochure really helpful when considering our feedback. Although some of our team is from Whakaropo area, not all of us are, which we think is a good thing as it brings in other perspectives. As you would have seen in our written submission, our feedback is based on 3 key themes: planning short and long term, nature preservation and transport roading, the marine transport network, and alternative routes.
As a council, you're aware of the importance of a good plan. As the saying goes, failing to plan is planning to fail. Climate change is an intergenerational equity issue, as well as an ocean and a biodiversity crisis. We believe that acting now is important. Big intergenerational ideas need to be acted upon now to prevent long-term impacts on any adaptive measures. Investment into long-term planning will cut down on costs and improve these things sooner. This is why we're so supportive of accelerating adaptation planning. So, while we understand some things should and need to be staggered over the longer term, some things such as tree planting, infrastructure required for the marine transport network, flood control, and renewable transport needs to be invested and progressed now. Even if the impacts aren't as bad as predicted, taking these measures early will benefit the community and the city regardless. We understand none of this is cheap. However, economic considerations are only one factor and should be balanced with cultural, social, and environmental considerations. Supported by our values shared earlier, we have provided some opinions in our submission as far as who and how to pay.
Our next piece of feedback is around nature preservation. Whatever we do as far as adaptation planning, it needs to be done with nature. Ensuring humans are prepared and are safe is important, but all other living things also need to be part of the plan. This includes land and marine impacts and flora and fauna. Climate change impacts are already affecting the natural environment, including animals and their habitats. Although we acknowledge it isn't always doable, where possible, we suggest you to prioritize working with preserving nature. Your brochure shares that what people wanted the coast to look like in 100 years. We noticed that they most often talked about the natural features of the area, like trees, plants, and bird life. This included clean, clear, and healthy swimmable water. As a team, we strongly agree with this. We would like more native trees to be planted to provide habitats and help with the erosion and fire control to protect and increase wildlife. We would also like reserves to be established in the area. The reserves will also provide green spaces for people to enjoy and relaxing and natural soft barriers for flooding and erosion.
And finally, we would like to share some thoughts and ideas around transportation in the area, short and long term. We accept there is a place for roads short term. However, as infrastructure improves and the alternate transport increases, both in options and in reliance, the dependence on roads should be decreased. This would mean accepting lower levels of service as time goes on. As people would have had time to get used to the idea, it won't seem so drastic. A key consideration, however, needs to be around access for emergency purposes, for example, medical, house, and wildfires. This may mean raising or moving specified emergency roads and ensuring communities are aware of all emergency procedures. To build capacity for other transport options, we would like to see an increase in support for the alternative transport, such as buses, bikes, and walking. For this reason, we are also supportive of the marine transport network. To achieve this and make them more attractive options, consideration would need to be given to the cost, for example, subsidise, convenience, times tables location, safety, especially on bike routes and walking tracks, and investing in infrastructure and renewable energy sources. However, as one of our key values, we are concerned about the impacts on the natural environment and the marine life in the harbour, as the harbour and its surrounds are used more frequently by more people. We suggest limiting the number of boats used in the harbour at one time, speed limits, and considering the types of boats being used.
I think one of the most important things to think about when it comes to climate change is safety. For example, the LA fires. It was such a tragedy, and so many people lost their homes. And in Ireland, there's just been a massive storm. My granddad had to leave his home, and when he came back, his garden was completely ripped up. He lost power for an entire day, and those are just some examples I can think of. We always need to be prepared because anything could happen at any time. As representatives from the NGC, we would again like to thank you for this opportunity. We were wondering if you had any feedback or questions for us. It would be helpful to get feedback for us, as anything you say or do now affects us for our future.
All good. Thank you very much. Now, anyone got any questions? No, you have done a fantastic job, and I congratulate you for coming in and putting your point of view across. Thank you very much.
Well, I have a couple of questions for you guys. So one of the ones I've written down is, what are the ways that the council includes the future generation in their decisions?
My learned friend here, we always look at, we've got to look at, like, you guys are our future. I've got a lot of grandkids and some of them very similar age to you, and they know a lot more about what's going on with the climate and pollution and all that sort of thing than I did even now. You know, so you guys are our future, so we've got to listen to what you guys are saying, because one day, one of you might be sitting here. So we need to listen.
Oh, thanks. Any questions?
Okay.
How do you like to, for example, if you have a problem that in an area and you're all split into different opinions of how to solve the problem, how do you end up solving the problem if everyone's got different opinions about it and everyone's got different ideas?
Yeah, here comes an extremely great answer. It all comes, so more or less what you're saying, that a lot of people are going to have the same problem at the same time. Is that right? So it all comes down, 1, to priority, 2, to money, and 3, to if we can actually physically do it. So it's we're lucky in a way that we're thinking about what's happening today, and it's the 10 to 30 year thing. At least we're looking at it now, so we can say one day that's going to happen. It's not to say it's going to happen a wee bit quicker, or it might happen a wee bit longer, but at least when it does start to happen and the trigger points happen, we can start doing it. And maybe we can look at putting money towards things, knowing that, the Teddington Road's going to flood one day. We could build it up a wee bit earlier and sort of get ahead of the 8 ball. I can see one day going down the track, I don't know if you go to Sumner very much, but some of that Teddington Road could well look like the causeway that goes across by the estuary when going to Sumner, with McCormick's Bay on one side and the estuary on the other. And that's what I envision some of those roads, maybe a lot of the low-lying ones, will end up looking like. But we're starting the plan now. We don't have to wait 40 years and say, oh, we better hurry up. At least we've got a plan in place. So,
Can I just add as well, Phil, that it's called debate. So when we get all different opinions from all different people, and some of them conflict, then we will sit around and we will, in a very mature, intelligent way, debate it. And so we try and convince all our colleagues. Well, I would try and convince my colleagues to agree with me, and they would do the same. And then we have a vote, and majority vote kind of makes the decision. But we do try to reach consensus where we can. Has that ever happened? I don't know, but yeah, that's... So it's called debate, and part of what forms our debate is listening to people like you that come in and give us your view.
so thank you very much for your time, Hannah and Oliver. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay. So now we have Pura Residents Group. Jill Rice, please. Graham, good to see you, man.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm Jill, and this is resident Graham Christie as well in Pura. Thank you for being so proactive and actually going ahead with this process. Much appreciated. I think one of the things that came through was, yes, looking at the costings, we wanted more of a breakdown just on these numbers that are up there. I think that would have been helpful in your appendices. And also there was some query about the input of the data that you've used, and what you put in is what you get out. What are the sensitivities around that? That would have been helpful to maybe to have that as well. And how often are you going to revisit that data? I mean, we're projecting 100 years, but are we going to, 25 years, look at what's actually happened, revise that, adjust? So that would be helpful. I'll jump straight to our jetty in Pura, currently in a very bad state, actually. I know we've had engineers and surveyors there last year, but actually we've got piles coming away. The ramp is actually dangerous and it's concrete's coming away. So it's actually urgent that it needs upgrading, regardless of the future. You're proposing that we lift and raise it for the next 25 years. I mean, I don't know how old it is now. I've been there 25 years and there's very little being done to it. Certainly lasts beyond the 25 years. I guess we want you to think a little bit long term. That jetty would probably be a bit of a lifeline. If our roads are blocked, that's our only way out. So it's imperative that that's maintained. And I think big and just go for building something that's going to be 100 years proof. Why do 25 years? The community's not going anywhere. So definitely that's one of our key points for raising is the jetty. You'll have Pura Moorings Association coming in here later today as well. I think they're going to talk to you about that. Then I'm going to go on to our road. Currently, we've had a couple of incidents over the last few years of king tide, river flooding, and we've had a bit of backup onto our reserves. There have been 2 occasions really that were kind of freak occasions. We are seeing erosion. We've had some benches go into the sea already. That's certainly happening. We're not in denial. But we have had, the road was put in, say, in the 1930s. It was shifted again. And we have actually a lot of build-up in Pura where you've got a lot of sediment coming down. So we've actually gained a lot of foreshore. I've got some photographs I can send through to you later on. And you'll see that, like in the 1950s, the water came right up to the road. So we've actually had quite a change of a landscape there already. The main thing about that road is it's key to getting to our neighbours in Port Levy. Very important. And we want that to be maintained. We want you, again, to think a bit long term. There's some queries about that Camp Bay Road. Maybe not, reducing the maintenance on that. But again, that's really important because that's actually a higher road. And when you come into Pura, that's actually quite lower lying there before the bridge. That's our lowest point. Camp Bay Road's higher. So they're going to, probably not have as many issues. But we do have a lot of farmers out that way. Stock need moving. That road, really, that link needs to be maintained. So we're really pushing for you to maintain that road. There's talk about maybe going back around in time, for that 100-year event and maybe rerouting the road. Again, we'd concern from some of those neighbours, how would you route it? Compulsory purchase, who are you eyeing up? They'd like to kind of know those things now, if that's the case. We'd like a little bit more than just we're thinking of rerouting. What would it look like? Our preference is really for you to look after that road that's there, if you can. So that's our sort of road reserve area. Within that, we've got a toilet in our reserve, which hasn't actually been repaired since the quakes. And that's also up for discussion about where that might go. Again, it's in that low-lying area. I think the preference from the community is, I think some money set aside for that already, is maybe to put it down at the eastern end of the bay, near that Camp Bay Road end, where it's more high-rise. There's talk about maybe that going inland, but it makes more sense to be there available for public. I'd say also, we're having some concerns as well about the foreshore at the moment, where you're actually about to spend about 120,000 on beautification and landscape plan. It's following a process that we were all dealing with on Monday. Just wondered whether that money might be better spent now, starting to do something to protect that road. You know, beautification's great, but really that's a lot of money. We could be starting at phase 1 in protecting that road. So maybe just thinking about where the money's going would be good. So they're the sort of major concerns that sort of came from the community. You know, the immediate stuff in Pura. I think, the harbour is a community. We're connected. We're connected to our schools. They do a lot of things together. Those roads are vital to keep that connectivity. If we're not going to have that, then we need maritime. We've got our ferry already, Diamond Harbour, but we would need more of that if we're going to have less roading. If you're not going to invest in roading, we need you to look at an alternative. Now, that wasn't mentioned in this whole process or your presentation. We'd like you to look further into those alternatives for connecting us together if the roads are out. Another one was civil defence. If you make Gebbies our main road out, we've had these fires. We couldn't use Doris Pass when the fires were on, these last 2 fires. So yes, we had to use Gebbies. But what if we've got fires in Gebbies? What's our way out? It's Doris Pass. It's Teddington Road. It's really quite crucial. We need 2 ways out. Going over the hill to Port Levy isn't an option, and on the gravel roads and out, it's just too slow and it's not safe. So one road in is not enough. So we really would like you to consider that Teddington Road to maintain it, not abandon it. Yes, it floods. There's weak points. Again, they're only weak points. I think it's worth saving anyway. I mentioned the ferries. Also schooling. Our high school kids go to Kashmir. That's our zone. So they use that Teddington Road. So we want, again, that road to be maintained for our children to go to high school. The other option is, yes, Gebbies. We used to once upon a time go to Lincoln, but that's really not on at the moment now at Selwyn. It's just busting at the seams. In fact, Kashmir is already an issue nearly. But yeah, it's really important for us to have that route for our children. The bus goes all the way from Port Levy, Purau, through Teddington, picks up the Governor's Bay kids and into town. So really important to have that connection. And also any of those roads really along there, we're wanting you to look into protecting them. So I guess the message is, start now, phase it in. The community's willing to help you as well. We're pretty resilient out there. We have to be because of where we live. But we're also willing to contribute our time, who knows, money, but to, protect where we live. We don't want the community to be abandoned. We're just, looking at a different way of living, and we accept that. But yeah, so anyway, open to questions if you want to ask me anything about Pura.
Yep, great. Sarah, please.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to assure you there was some miscommunication last year, and we heard a staff presentation at the beginning of today that you might have missed. There isn't a proposal to close Teddington Road.
No, but
yeah.
just...
so it does remain?
Yeah, but just the maintenance of it. I mean, the impression is that it's going to be reduced, and we want something better than just open occasionally. It needs to be open.
It would be closed occasionally as opposed to open occasionally.
Okay, other way. Okay, but
the plan.
To maybe, limit that, try and get it open as much as possible, again, because of that civil defence, because of the schooling. It's really important. It's our lifeline to the rest of the harbour.
There's been some changes to the plan and the wording to make all of that stuff clearer, based on the feedback that you and others have given.
Okay, great.
Yanni, please.
Thank you for your submission. I was just really interested in the
ferry, you talk about it being reinstated,
Purao.
possibly, and I was just wondering, why was it removed in the first place, and what would be the benefits?
I think because a long time ago the jetty used to come out and go like that, and it was accessible. But actually, now the jetty's half the size or the wharf. So I think that's probably something to do with it. I'm not sure really why that service stopped. That was sort of just before my time, but there was a link there some time ago, and it would be really good to have that coming back.
So so currently now, if people want to get the ferry, it just goes from Diamond.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to Rapapa Island as well. Like the ferry will go to Rapapa Island, it's for more of a day out sort of thing. But it used to come into Purao as well. So it'd be nice to have that connectivity again. But yes, you have to go up to Diamond Harbour. Right. But it'd be good to have that. If we've got a proper jetty again, we can do that. So think big.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good on Yanni. And Tyrone, you've got 18 seconds.
Thank you. Hi, Jill and Graham. Good to see you again. And so, would it be fair to say you'd like to see council consider the provision of reserve land in Purdo away from the water, really, like in future, like at some point?
Yeah, we'd love you to compensate us and provide more reserve land inland.
That's kind of not what I'm. Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah. We realise we're going to lose some.
Because the current reserve's at risk.
Oh, absolutely. So why start spending lots of money on it? Let's be more defensive.
Yeah.
And start protecting what we've got.
Start thinking about reserve land further down the Purdo Port Levy Road kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so.
In future.
That was the feedback. Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
That was a very good common sense submission. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm a bit like that.
I hope that guy next year had nothing to do with it.
Thank you.
Rightio. Now we've got Port Levy Residents Association. Margie Newton, please. Hello.
Hi everyone, it's Margie, by the way.
Sorry.
Good morning. I'm Margie Newton. I'm speaking to the submission that the PLRA, that's the Port Levy Residents Association, submitted in regards to the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Plan. The submission was very short. I hope you've read it. But the reasons behind this submission are substantial and important, which is why I'm glad to be able to speak to you today. I remind you that I'm speaking on behalf of the whole of the Port Levy Residents Association. We have 144 members on our emailing list at the moment, as the chairperson of this group. We represent the majority of the residents in the bay, and we have close ties with the Runanga, which is the other large group in our bay. To start with, I'd like to say that we understand the need for the Coastal Hazards Adaptation Plan, for planning for climate change and sea level rise in our vulnerable coastal environments. A managed retreat has to be planned, and that will necessitate some really tough decisions and some careful allocation of the resources available. And those decisions must be made by you on our behalf. As representatives of the council, you have a grave and important responsibility to make decisions on our behalf which foster cohesive and prosperous communities that represent the interests of its citizens, and with the strategic priority of being inclusive and equitable. And those are quotes from your website. I know the residents of Wharf Road have sought legal counsel in the writing of their joint submission, and it covers all the factual, evidence-based and legal information required to support it. You'll hear that later. Other submissions will give expert opinions on coastal erosion, on environmental protection and the effects of climate change in Port Levy. But as I'm representing the community, my focus will be on the people of Wharf Road, whose needs and concerns you are bound to consider. The residents of Wharf Road are citizens of Christchurch City, just like the other 415,100 people who live in this district. They're entitled to the same consideration as all the other residents, regardless of where they live. They pay rates and they contribute to the economy and the welfare of the city. They already get very little in return, it's got to be said. They benefit from no waste management, no water, no sewage management, and a single gravel road, which is the only access to their homes, businesses and properties. Here are 7 very good reasons why Wharf Road in Port Levy should remain open. The first, at the far end of the road, the Helps have a large cattle and sheep farm, managed by another local family, the Howdens. Access to the farm is Wharf Road. There's also a mussel farm off the coast of the property, managed by people who must also use Wharf Road as access. They have 2 rental cottages on the farm. All guests and cleaners must use Wharf Road as access. And the Helps themselves have a large family home. Next on the road are Martin and Verity, a couple who run a hugely successful B&B in their house, which is booked solid for most of the year. Both Martin and Verity are very much loved residents of the Bay, who make a huge contribution to our community by organising all our community events. Then we have the Barnetts property, Kaihope. It's a large farm which has been in their family for generations. Richard also leases several other properties around the bay and is a very busy man indeed. They also own the massively successful Ecopod up on the Port Levy Hill, which is always booked out, as well as having an historic B&B cottage on their property dating back to the 1890s. The Barnetts employ a number of people, all who use Wharf Road daily, as well as the considerable farm-related traffic. Further back down toward the head of the bay are the Craw family. They are 3 generations living on a large farm in a range of houses, including Carolyn and John and some of his children. John commutes into town as a lawyer, and they also have a B&B on their property. Clearly, Wharf Road is a very desirable location. The farm is currently leased to the Barnetts further up the road. Below the Craws are the O's, a working couple of lawyers who recently purchased the cottage and have spent a lot of money upgrading it to a very high standard, including their building platform very high to combat sea level rise as required by the council. Next to the O's are the Barabos. Kathy and Jim built their retirement home in the 2000s and have been spending half their time there ever since, except for a period of time during COVID when their son and his family lived there full-time. And finally, our house is the first on the road. We use Wharf Road to access our cattle yards in the bottom of our property, as does Richard Barnett, who leases our property and uses our yards as a base for all his farming operations. Our back neighbour, Jackie Broadbent, also uses our Wharf Road access to her farm property. So that's the 7 groups of people who will feel the immediate impact of the Wharf Road proposals. Increased insurance, reduced property valuations, reduced saleability of property, more difficult access to their properties for themselves, their guests and businesses, emergency services, and to council works and maintenance as time goes by. In the future, if Wharf Road is eventually closed, all those properties and people will be forced to move. The majority of members of the Residents Association do not live on Wharf Road, but we are united in our belief that it is an important and much used asset to our community that must not be written off. Many people use the beach at Kaihope, the stretch at the head of the bay, and the slipway halfway along Wharf Road to launch boats and kayaks, to go fishing, to go swimming, to access the bay, the mussel farm, or simply to walk along by the sea. So, why does the council feel that Wharf Road is not worth saving? There is a duty from you to better explore the options for saving it, which could include some strategic coastal planting, some erosion control, building up the short stretch of road by the sea, or moving the road further up from the sea, through some paddocks which are clear of existing structures, which belong to residents of Wharf Road who have a clear interest in keeping it open. But nobody has inquired. The cost of these alternatives to closure couldn't be too prohibitive. I know $10 to $15 million was suggested to you as the cost of building up that short stretch of road, but that has got to be the most expensive option, and as far as I'm aware, no other options have been explored. We certainly have not been approached in any way. As $35 million has been allocated to protecting the other coastal assets of our small town of Port Levy, it certainly doesn't seem equitable to me that Wharf Road is not deemed worthy of any money. Equitable consideration must mean that Wharf Road is given the same treatment as any other road in Christchurch City, and you've mentioned a few yourself which have already been proofed against sea level rise. Just because a small stretch of it lies close to the sea, it doesn't mean it should be written off as not worth the money. I know of roads in our district which have had several $1 million spent on them just last year for the benefit of one family property. Goffs Bay Road is that example. Power Bay Road and Long Bay Road were also repaired last year at the cost of millions, and the access to them is a couple of properties. So, why does the council feel that Wharf Road is not worth saving?
Thank you very much. You used up your time right to the last dot, and very clear what you're putting across. Thank you very much for coming in.
No worries. Any questions?
No, we've run out of time, sorry, and we're already running out of more time. So, Governor's Bay School, Angie, please. And a few helpers. Good to see these young people.
Kia ora katoa. My name is Arlo. Thank you for the opportunity to share our thoughts and ideas on the Council's adaptation plan for whakaraupo on Kokorata Port Levy. Today, we are here representing feedback from Governor's Bay School, Year 6 to 8 class of 2024.
Kia ora. My name is Xavier. Over the past few years, our senior classes have been learning about climate change. Not just the science, but also the actions we can all take to mitigate and adapt to the impacts. This has been included exploring different worldviews and perspectives, critical thinking, and our rights as children to have a say on things that interest and affect us.
Kia ora, my name is Ben. Climate change is obviously something that both interests and affect us, not just now but in the future. Although the impacts of changing climate are already being felt and experienced, we know that they will affect our lives and future generations more. So before we get to our targeted feedback, we want to thank the Council for planning ahead for the impacts of climate change. There has already been a lot of talking, but not always a lot of actual planning and action.
Kia ora tātou. My name is Lumi. Although we discussed wider plans for Whakaropa, we mainly focused on Allendale, the Governor's Bay Foreshore Track and Governor's Bay Teddington Road. We also have some feedback on the suggested marine transport network and harbour in general.
The first bit of our feedback is around the Foreshore Track. We really love the track and use it a lot for walks, runs, and riding bikes. It also provides access to the water. Visitors to the bay often come just to walk the track. The track is a big part of who we are, not just now, but also for the history that it holds. Therefore, although we accept that it will flood and erode more and more, at some point it will need to close, we do not agree with your current preferred pathway between now and then.
Firstly, we notice that within 5 or so years, you'll stop maintaining the track and move to a lower level of service. We are keen to know more on what they'll actually look and feel like, including whether we will still be able to walk, run and bike on it, and be able to access the water.
Secondly, we also noticed in your preferred pathway that about 30 or so years you'll go straight to closing the track, skipping the protect option. We'd prefer that between now and the threshold of closing it, that you consider protecting the track. And whatever you do, ensure all other living things are considered and protected as part of the approach.
We would now like to discuss the road. We agree that the road should be maintained and agree with the general direction of your preferred pathway. However, we think you should act on the threshold of raising the road or even moving it earlier.
Our preferred pathway is to maintain the road for about 30 or so years and then go straight to raising it or moving it in about 40 or so years, bypassing the lower levels of service option. And again, whatever you do, ensure all other living things are considered and protected as part of your approach.
Our final feedback is around the marine transport network and the harbour in general. Generally, we like the idea of the marine transport network. Something we would like to see in your plan is to make sure that whenever possible, the boats being used are eco-friendly and use renewable energy.
We would also like there to be a focus on limiting the impact of the system on the marine life and the surrounding natural environment.
And finally, as a class, you may have noticed we really are keen to protect all other living things as well as humans when planning for climate change. We really like the idea of Te Whakaropō becoming a marine reserve and Quail Island becoming a sanctuary for bird life. We would also like to see more trees. So a plan for planting trees would be good, especially native ones and ones that don't burn easily.
In 40 years, I'd like to come back and be able to actually see the dolphins. This is our harbour and we can fix it up. We can do this because with the right path, our harbour will be restored. We'd like the foreshore track to be restored too. The foreshore track, which our forefathers and mothers walked along gathering food for the everyday. This is our heart, soul and future, and we are all in control of it. All of the people in our community have walked along this track. I grew up on this track. Our beloved Margaret Mahi walked along this track. So together we will fix it up. Like little fish, we are stronger together.
I think we should think about the ocean and marine life first, because we want, as a community, to be able to walk down to the ocean and be able to jump off the jetty and splash and paddle in the shores. When we first looked around Governor's Bay to look round an open home, and there were flax bushes and there were several tuis. Now there are none, and we've been living in a house for only 2 or so years, and I can't imagine what it will be like in 10, 20 or 30 years unless we change.
Okay, Allendale Domains is an awesome... Okay, go.
Okay. The prisoners...
Allendale Domain is an awesome area to walk dogs, exercise horses/ponies, hold public events, and is a space for GBS, Governor's Bay School, to do their athletics tournament. All the horse owners in Allendale use the domain for working their horses. There would be no place to ride in a flat area if it flooded. The fete that is held in October every year wouldn't have a place to be held if the domain wasn't there. It is also an access to the waterfront/foreshore track, which is the safest place for children that live in Allendale to walk to and from school, as well as a walk or run away from the road. Please can you protect this track, because it is also a place to ride ponies and bike and access the water, which is a fun place and it's nice to live. Yeah.
As a team and the class who aren't here today, we would like again to thank you for this opportunity. We look forward to working with you again in the future. We have now come to the end of our presentation, and we were wondering if you had any feedback or questions for us. It would be helpful to get feedback for us, as anything you say or do now affects us for the future.
Thank you very much, Governor's Bay School. You've done a fantastic job for your school. I have one question from Tyler at the moment.
Yeah. Kia ora koutou. You guys did amazing. Thank you so much for coming in. I just wanted to ask a bit more of a personal question. Is what's your most favourite thing about Governor's Bay, and what do you like to do the most?
I like going down to the jetty and jumping off it. Just really fun. You can do it with your friends, and it just brings everyone together.
I love how small the community is in Governor's Bay. It's such a tiny community, and it's really nice. Going up the Zephyr Terrace track is really fun, and it's completely bush out there, and it's so nice.
I like how our community is really connected, and there's so many fun things to do, and I feel like growing up there would be really fun, and there's not much, there's nothing, you would never be bored.
I also really like the horse track, like I said before. I like to ride my ponies on it. It's really nice because we can exercise them and get them fit for going ahead into shows and stuff, but it's also a really nice place.
That sounds like you've got a really strong connection to your neighbourhood, eh?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. They're great answers.
Celeste?
Thanks, guys. Great presentation. And I just want to, mostly just some comments, but I think I was reading through your presentation and your feedback, and you asked some really good questions about, in terms of the marine transport plan, how will that work in practice? So I just want to acknowledge that you guys have made some really good points. And I also like the idea of Quail Island, your suggestion around making that a sanctuary for bird life. I think it's a genius idea, so well done. And also your comments around making sure that we consider trees and nature and plantings, because it's easy to focus on roads and infrastructure, but nature's a really big, important part of adapting to climate change. So I just want to say you guys have done an awesome job, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Sorry. Last one, Kelly.
Thanks, guys. Really good presentation. Just in terms of what you do in your community, are you guys involved in any plantings and predator-free stuff? Because I certainly, I know what you mean in terms of the bird life, etc. Yeah.
I did some planting in Autumn Bradley. I did the William Pike Challenge, which means I had to do 20 hours of community service, and I did a bit around around Governor's Bay. No, not at the moment, but I'm sure that there was traps and trapping things out in the portals that we could get involved in.
There's a great movement with predator-free. I bought some traps myself, and it's certainly bringing the bird life back in certain places. So it might be something really good to get your teeth into.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for the effort you put in. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay, Banks Peninsula Community Board, Asif? Yeah, thank you. Welcome, mate. Good to see you again.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to make a submission on the draft plan. I take you have read the report. I just want to make some overarching comments. It's really good proactive action by the council and very good presentations by Next Generation Conservation and Governor's Bay School. We get quite a lot of those at the board. And thank you, Jane and Tom, for a good plan. One good thing about the plan I personally like and other board members share is its community-centric approach. It has been very focused. There's been quite a lot of community involvement in getting feedback and analyzing their data. And it has been presented really well. It's a proactive planning approach, and all the options are nature-based solutions. So I think it is a really good organic way to address climate change on the peninsula. Some critical aspects that the plan has highlighted is resource limitation, both funding and others. And we have noticed that it has taken a couple of years for the team to develop a plan for Whakaropo. And Banks Peninsula is a bigger, wider community. There are a number of other places they would like similar plan done, but because of the resources, they can't be achieved. So that is obviously one of the key limitations. As we know about the climate change, it's uncertain. The outcomes are uncertain. So while we acknowledge the limitations, the uncertainty is the key. And it makes us hard to make a decision, both for you as a council and for anyone who develops a plan like this. There are significant challenges, as it has been identified in the plan, including closure or partial closure of various roads and services in that area, which will have an economic impact because a number of communities from that area, they commute to Christchurch and other parts to make a living. Farming community is quite play a significant role on the peninsula. One key limitation of the plan is a limited data on blue carbon potential under which has potential and could be included. Blue carbon captures and stores in coastal and marine areas, which could really be identified. Going forward, because of the climate change, a number of farms on the peninsula are being turned into pine plantations. They will have a significant impact. As we have seen in Auckland flooding, one event that is estimated to be 9 to 14.5 billion cost. Infrastructure is the key for Peninsula. Numerous communities, they either have one road, and there's no alternative to that. And other members, submitters made a comment this morning that is quite critical for them. Tracks, Governor Bay to Allendale foreshore track is quite critical for these communities, as you have seen, that it is being used in a number of ways by everyone, both visitors and the residents of all age. Jetties and water infrastructure is quite critical for Banks Peninsula in various ways. As was mentioned by someone about fire, that water infrastructure jetties become critical. Imagine if we had a Port Levy fire and extends to Governor's Bay, and that's it. So it will be very challenging and need thoughtful planning when investing in those infrastructure on the peninsula, especially in reference to this plan. And there are concerns about landfills around Allendale landfill. If sea level rise continues with this rate, we'll see a lot of old dumps will end up in our harbour. So it will have a significant impact, and there is a lot of data research globally and in New Zealand, which supports that to mitigate and address that issue before it is too late. Banks Peninsula, it's estimated that by 2040, we could experience 30 mil sea level rise, which is estimated to impact our 20,000 properties worth 14 billion in Christchurch and Banks Peninsula, which is a significant number. So we have to ask whether investment now in adapting to this plan or mitigating, what is the cost, what would the cost be if we didn't act now? The cost for fire on Port Levy, it was $3 to $4 million. And there are ways we could monitor it, address it proactively earlier. their cost is very limited. But the cost when a hazard happens, that is where it hurts the council the most. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Yep, Yanni, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the board submission. I'm not sure if you heard the previous submitter around Wharf Road, but there was some concern around council's investment into some roads that had a benefit much less than the future protection of Wharf Road. Did the board, I just note in your submission there's no reference to Wharf Road. I was just keen to know if the board had considered the Wharf Road issue or had a perspective around what was proposed for there.
I can't speak for the board on that particular case. But when it comes to council, you have to make a decision of cost and benefit. So if you just put a dollar value to everything, then yes, it is not economical to maintain that road. But if you add the cascaded value that it brings to that community, both social and cultural aspects of that area, you just can't overlook that. So economics is not everything. It is the social aspects that mean to the people there, and the people who chose to live there, they live there for a reason. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's brilliant. Thanks for making the time to come in.
Yeah, no other questions? Yeah. Thank you.
Good on you. Right, Federated Farmers, is Carl here, please?
Good morning, councillors.
Hey, bud.
Thank you very much for allowing us the time as Federated Farmers to speak to you on this submission. I believe you would have all had time to read it. So just a few, the main concerns for us is about the Wharf Road potential closure, and also the fact that there seems to have been a lack of consultation in that area. The option of reduced maintenance, effectively looking at straight away, effectively looks to close the road as a set decision, because if you reduce maintenance, obviously the road will deteriorate. Then the argument to close the road becomes greater before alternative options have even been looked at. So we do believe that the flood proofing and protection could be looked at, and whether it could be relatively cost effectively done. But the main concern is making sure that this doesn't set a precedent for other roads in the Banks Peninsula and Christchurch City rural area, where roads are moved down the scale, effectively reduced maintenance and then eventually closure, impacting the rural sector quite considerably. So, and we just ask that we remind the council that their focus on key priorities of roading is quite a key focus in this area. When this road does provide to 9 dwellings, 36 land titles, and including three farms. So as the previous submitter did say, there is quite an economic benefit in keeping the road open for those properties and making sure that there is some way to work forward with some consultation with those landowners to look at keeping that road open for the next, it's been open for 100 years. Why shouldn't it be open for the next 100? Any questions on our submission?
Tyler, please.
G'day, Carl. Hey, I remember as a young fella going through Wharf Road, and the sea during high tide usually used to come right up to the road sometimes, particularly on big weather events. I'm wondering, with the last submission around the Port Lever Residents Association, they talked about the potential of moving the road towards closer to land and to the farms to potentially go over some titles. Do you think there is any potential in the sharing of title to get a road going through those properties?
I think that's a very clear question of the fact that, like we say, there hasn't been that consultation to determine that factor. I mean, you'd have to actually have time to do a consultation with those landowners to be able to have that as an option.
Okay.
And that this here says that there hasn't been that consultation as such.
Yeah. Would there be any other alternative solutions from the Federated Farmers' perspective in being able to keep that road open without having that coastal inundation?
Yeah, I think the only one that we looked at is about a 400-metre stretch that is low-lying.
Yeah.
And whether there's rock available locally over in the bay there to readily lift that up at a cost-effective rate would be the sensible option.
Awesome. Very good. Cheers.
Thank you. I've got a question, Carl. As you said, the only bit that's low-lying is about 400 or 500 metres long. And that, if it's 8 metres wide and 1 metre deep, is 3,200 cubic metres. Now, that's not a hell of a lot of shingle in anyone's language. And even if it was placed at $200 a cubic metre, that's only $640,000. I understand also it says about erosion on the other part of the road, but that's happening anyway. Right now, for the last 100 years, there's been erosion, and when it slips, someone will clean it up and tidy it up. So it's only, in my view, for what I'm seeing, the only bit that's the bit at risk is the 400 or 500 metres long that could be quietly built up over a number of years as the water comes up, and just leave the rest of it, because it's all gravel, the whole thing. I am right, am I?
Yes, it is.
So it's only probably graded 3 times a year, is it?
I believe I've been told by the residents maybe 2.
Okay.
So
yeah,
if we
and
reduced maintenance, will be down to 1, in which case the road deteriorates.
But a gravel road,
rapidly.
if it's not getting used a hell of a lot and it's made out of good AP40 that Teddington make, it holds itself together real good. So that's something that I think we should certainly look at, because it's not a lot of dough for a short piece to keep everything else open. Sarah. Okay, cool. Aaron?
Just on that, if the council, just thinking how some farmers work and have over the last 150, 200 years, if the council abandon the road, how does that work in most rural districts? Do local farmers kick in and turn up with the grader an extra time a year and keep it alive?
Well, at the moment, from what I understand, the landowners actually take care of the road most of the time anyway. So if there's a small slip, if there's a tree down...
That was the history of BP anyway, that a lot of that was done for decades.
Yeah, but that's the thing, that at the moment, it's a council asset. And at the moment, landowners still take care of the majority of it. If there's a small slip, if there is a tree that comes down, they don't go and ring the council to come clear it away at a cost. So at the end of the day, it's, try to keep that asset open for other road users and other landowners in the future. And if we look into the next, with this plan looks out over the next 100 years, who's to say that 9 dwellings doesn't become 20, 30, as the sprawl of the urban environment takes place and people live more remotely. And I mean, it's a beautiful place over there, so there's no reason why people wouldn't...
It's going to be underwater.
Some of it will be, potentially.
Okay. Pauline, and then we'll move on to the next one.
One of the alternative options is to just reduce the use to private use. What's your view on that?
Well, the problem is that there is obviously 2 other truncating roads off Wharf Road. So how would you then split the cost of that between all the various landowners in terms of maintenance? Becomes quite difficult.
Just private use, not private,
not public use.
Yeah.
But then who would be responsible for the maintenance and things like that of
the council still would, but it limits the use.
the traffic?
It's just
again, that would be something that a consultation would highlight.
Yeah, hasn't been discussed.
It hasn't been discussed as far as I'm aware.
Rightio. Thank you, Carl. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okie doke. Lloyd's, please. And what have we got? A solicitor on behalf of Wharf Road. Good to see you.
Don't hold that against me. Good morning. My name is Lloyd Scully and I'm presenting on behalf of the Wharf Road residents. Beside me is John Crawl, who lives on Wharf Road, and in the gallery behind me, a number of the other Wharf Road residents presenting today. Now, just to set the scene, for those that don't know the Port Levy area, I prepared a few slides. And like everyone said, it's a beautiful part of Christchurch, and I say Christchurch, not Banks Peninsula, because we are one district. And as you can see, Port Levy is a sheltered harbour, and this picture shows the end of Pura Port Levy Road. From here, you either turn right to the jetty or left along Wharf Road. This next slide shows the start of Wharf Road. Like everyone's mentioned, it's gravel, and the first 500 metres is the only part of the road that is affected by the coastal flooding. And since the road gradually goes up, it doesn't get affected. And in this next slide are the roads in Port Levy. Both are dead ends and is only access for residents. However, only one road is proposed to be closed, and that's Wharf Road. Along Wharf Road, a number of residents and families, businesses, Airbnbs, and 3 farms. These are rate-paying residents, some of whom have lived here for decades. They know the land, are a tight-knit group, and can comment on what weather effects have occurred and how it's affected the road. Now, I have a confession to make. I don't actually live on Wharf Road, but if I did, I'd probably have to brush up on my swimming skills if council decide to close it. Now, you would have read in our submissions that the residents along Wharf Road did not receive direct communication about the plan. While the council consulted with a number of groups in the wider community, schools, via newsletters, radio, Facebook, and so on, there was not one letter sent to directly affected residents along Wharf Road. And now my second confession. I've worked at council before in the city planning team in a previous life, and so I know what the consultation process is. Consultation requires identifying who your stakeholders are and those that would be most affected. And even council documentation, up on screen now, stated that residents directly affected and those impacted by access dependencies would be engaged, as you can see. And it's clear and undeniable that the most affected of the closure of Wharf Road are the residents of the road. So understandably, the residents are frustrated with this lack of engagement and consultation. And it's also disappointing that the people who use the road, who know the area and conditions, who would have been a real asset to the coastal panel, could have provided meaningful input into the plan, were not involved at all. Now, I believe reliance was placed too heavily on residents' groups to spread the word. However, it was noted, if you see on the slide now, from minutes from a working group meeting back in 2021, that resident associations are unlikely to be the true cross-section of the community. So I find it difficult to understand how a one-page letter informing residents that they are directly affected by the proposed plan did not happen. We do note that since the residents were made aware of the plan by accident, we contacted council to arrange a meeting, which happened late last year, and we thank council for making this happen. And as a result of that meeting, there are a couple of recommendations in the report in front of you today. But who knows what other recommendations and changes should have or could have been made if the residents were informed and consulted earlier. Now, I now move on to the definition of closure. On the slide are screenshots from the plan. Under Wharf Road, it currently reads that as these impacts increase and the road becomes unsafe and unable to be used, we'd need to explore the partial or full closure of the road. Eventually, it will need to be closed to some or all types of traffic. In the glossary section, road closure is defined. A road closure means that a certain section of the road is temporarily or permanently blocked off, preventing all or certain types of vehicles and pedestrians from using it. And when asked the meaning of closure in a webinar last year, council responded with the following. Close refers to no longer providing the asset going forward and could involve either discontinuing maintenance or the full decommissioning of an asset. Now, English may not be my first language, but I don't know how anyone living on Wharf Road could read this and not get up in arms. It clearly indicates that your one and only access could be closed permanently to all types of traffic, probably including yours. Now, This may not have been the intention of council, and we've read the proposed amendments to the definition of road closure. However, it still reads that there could be a possibility that it will be permanently physically closed, as shown above. And when closure means being landlocked, that's not an option that is acceptable to the residents of Wharf Road. Now, although the proposed new definition goes on to say, does not change the legal status of the road, that doesn't really mean much. All everyone sees and reads is that this road is being closed. Therefore, we propose that the wording on page 73 be amended as per above. I won't read all of it, it was in our submission, but the last sentence is crucial. For the avoidance of doubt, if Wharf Road is closed to the public, it will continue to be open to landowners, occupiers, and any person having authorised business requiring access to the properties. By accepting this proposed wording, you would be alleviating the concerns held by the residents. Now, we understand draft adaptation plans will eventually be rolled out to the rest of Christchurch, and getting terminology correct and reader-friendly should be a priority, or else you're just going to get the same reaction. Moving on to my last point. The council officer's report to include a second alternative option is great to see. Again, this came as a result of the meeting residents had with council last year. The option proposed on the screen now is to include the following. Again, I won't read all of it, but the last sentence proposed by council reads, this alternate option would be challenging and costly due to the lack of available public land and the need to manage drainage in, around, and below the new road. We propose to add the additional sentence at the end that reads, however, with landowner and or community support, it may be more feasible than other alternative options. Council must remember that in a tight-knit community, such as Port Levy, the landowners, the community, are more than happy to support workable alternatives. If proper consultation had been done, this alternative option could have been investigated fully and potentially could be more reasonable and a feasible option. We also note in Orion's submission that their asset goes across the same area that's susceptible to the coastal flooding. And you'll see this on screen now, and I've circled it in yellow. Now, if there was a combined approach with landowners, the community, Orion, and council, costs could be shared, making some of these alternative options that are deemed too costly workable. The concept of community partnership was also raised in the combined residents group submission, which we consider should be further investigated prior to decisions made in the future. Now, before I wrap up, I have to highlight the unfair treatment of Wharf Road compared to the other assets in the plan. If you review the brochure for Port Levy, it's evident that Wharf Road is missing. The brochure identifies Port Levy as just the section on the right and fails to recognise the residents and homes on Wharf Road. And in the report today, it says that Wharf Road's traffic volumes are less than 20 vehicles per day. Now, I don't recall seeing stats for any of the other assets in the plan, assets that are receiving substantial funding. Now, consider this, 1.2 million is set aside for 3 toilets. A hall that hasn't been used for 2 years is allocated $630,000, and a beach access track, $750,000. How many people have been estimated to use those tracks and assets per day? Shouldn't an asset that provides access to residents be more of a priority, or at least receive some funding? Now, I hope the council considers our submissions and comments today. The text amendments we proposed are justified and simple to implement. They would provide residents peace of mind, ensuring they won't be landlocked, and that continued access to their homes is guaranteed. As for the preferred pathway and alternative options, further investigation is clearly needed to determine funding priorities. Does the council, now this is the biggie, does the council truly believe toilets and tracks are more important and deserving of funding than residents' access to their homes? The decision you make today will answer this question. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Sorry, we're out of time, but absolutely perfect timing, and I understand everything you're saying. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Philip and Jane, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Philip and Jane Helps from End of Wharf Road. Yeah, well, it's pretty well, everything I could say has been said. You've heard it loud and clear already, and I know there's more submissions to come to reiterate what's already been said. I'm happy for you to take our submission as being read, rather than me warble through it. However, there's a couple of points I'd like you to consider, and maybe people might have questions about it, and as part of my submission. Now, on the first page there, from what we've seen to date, there's been no factual evidence given to us about the sea level rise in Port Levy, the variation between mean high water and the top of Wharf and the top of and Wharf Road itself. Is it a metre above mean high water now, or is it 1.5 metres, etc.? So that was one issue I'd like you to think about long and hard about. The working party. I note that there was no oceanographer on that working party. Now, I would have thought when the council dealing with potential sea level rise would have had an oceanographer on that party and taken, expert advice. As it turns out, we actually have a retired oceanographer living in the bay, and he's done extensive work for Littleton Borough Council over the years, and his words were the evidence presented to the council here from this plan, and this plan is just bollocks. He said there is no factual evidence that the sea level's potentially going to go up to 1.5 metres, it mentions worst case scenario. I think nationally we're talking about 1.5 millimetres per annum historically over the last 100 years. So just ask the council to really think long and hard about that business there. The other issue I'd like to just pull up is that storms and flooding is part of the equation here. Now, we had, in my experience, we've had one storm, we've had over 650 millimetres of rain in a week. Now, that obliterated the roads of Port Levy, the bridges, the bridge approaches, etc. And one thing we learnt there, one real lesson we learnt was we can survive without the power, the telephone, but by God, we can't survive without that access. And that's, wish you to keep that in mind. So, I'm open to any questions.
Yep. Yeah. Yanni, please. Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you for your submission. I was just interested in, and obviously it's a bit related to the previous submission that we didn't have time to ask questions of, but I get it that you're working as a bit of a collective. In my mind, I'm wondering whether it's better that we adopt the kind of we consider the alternative recommendations as part of this process and make a decision, or would it be preferable, given the concern around the consultation, that we carve out this particular section, allow more time for more engagement with local residents, and then come back with consideration? And I'm just wrestling with, we've heard some submitters say, here's some alternative options that you could adopt that would be useful. Then we've also heard that, there's been an inadequacy in how residents feel that they've been consulted and engaged. And I'm just wondering whether more time and more engagement with residents would get to a better outcome, or whether you think we're kind of in a position to make a decision based on the feedback that you're giving us today.
My personal opinion is that, yes, the residents of Wharf Road and Port Levy at large would just welcome more time, more consultation, sit around the table and come to a common sense conclusion. That's what it needs. There's bloody great options out there for you to take up. There's, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I've got one more question. You've been at the forefront of it all your life, so you know what's happening.
Yeah.
I was really, hello. I was really
Good morning.
taken with the concept of community collaboration and forming a partnership with council to maybe investigate an alternative route.
Yes.
Do you think that's feasible?
Absolutely.
And do you think that the rest of the residents there would have buy-in?
Absolutely, without question.
So you've had some discussions about that sort of informal...
We've, of course, discussed alternatives amongst ourselves over time, but that's the way to go. Yeah.
I mean, a big positive on that could bring it over the line would be if council did not have to purchase the land, of course. I don't know if you've had any discussions about that, but that's
I would say that would be your most expensive option.
Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Right, ho. Graham, please. Diamond Harbour Community Association.
So break up this one.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to our submission. And I'd like to start by thanking the Coastal Adaptation team and the technical group, and especially the Coastal panel for their work on this plan, which we really appreciate. As you'll see from our submission, we're generally in agreement with the plan's preferences as regards the areas that are relevant to us. Our main item of disagreement is over the Teddington Junction to Governor's Bay stretch of the road, where the plan's preference is to let that be maintained at a lower level and put more into the safeguarding the route via Gebby's Pass. We can understand the logic in that, having one way out rather than none at all. But we are of the mind that there's a strong case for keeping both routes, and especially that there are important ways in which our community would be disadvantaged by a route that started to degrade more than or be less use than it is at present. It's obviously a road that's used on a daily basis by a large proportion of our residents. There's also services coming in, the tradies, all kinds of people who bring the petrol to us, the food to our supermarket. And then you've got the emergency services, the use of that route by ambulances, by fire vehicles. You've got the school pupils who go over the hill to schools. You've got the farm vehicles, keep farms connected with Christchurch. All of these people would be disadvantaged if they had to take a significantly longer route round via Gebby's Pass. We feel that the extra cost to both to travellers and to the economy is perhaps underestimated as far as the plan goes. At peak times, it could add up to about half an hour to a journey coming up through up the State Highway and through Lincoln Road, for instance. So it isn't a small amount, and on a return trip, that especially for people like school pupils or the elderly, that could be quite a difference. We were a wee bit disappointed that the plan put forward costings and construction details which were along the lines of the preferred options rather than all options. We're glad that subsequently these have been added. That's good, but obviously they weren't available during the consultation. If there had been more like-for-like details, then I think we would have been more able to make a comparison for instance, raising the whole road, not just the road up to Teddington Junction, but on from there to Governor's Bay. It was difficult to know how much that would be. Another point we feel is that there's a bit of uncertainty because at the moment the plan's only talking about going up to Gibby's Pass. So it's uncertain what will happen from there as regards the improvements that would be necessary from the road from Gibby's Pass to the State Highway and on the State Highway into town. That's an unknown quantity. Lastly, I suppose I'd like to say that we rather feel that it's not very much to ask, although finances are obviously always strained, and we have to balance different areas. We're talking about 6 kilometres roughly of road to be treated here out of about 35 kilometres round the harbour. And 6 kilometres doesn't seem a lot if we got talking about protecting it for, say, 100 years. And it would mean a lot to the residents of our area. And we would like things to happen quicker than possibly envisaged in the plan. The stretch, especially at Orton Bradley, Charteris Bay, there are times where the high tide is within half a metre of the road. So rather than waiting another 5-10 years until something is done there, we would ask the council to make it a bit more urgent to protect the road. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's brilliant. Any questions, please? Tyrone and Sarah.
Thank you. Kia ora, Graham.
Yep.
I haven't seen you in at least 18 hours. Thanks for coming in. Just on public on the ferry, actually, just the route out of Diamond Harbour and over to Littleton and that. So I guess probably that's going to get more and more important over time. What are the sort of the improvements that I mean, council doesn't control necessarily all of the elements of that network, but what are the improvements that could be made in order to make that service better for people who need to commute? And so where are the kind of the gaps as you see it that we need to think about in the future?
I think we've been very lucky. We've had a new wharf, as you know, recently, and it works very well, and the service is good. They have upgraded the vessels every so often, and it's quite a good service. There's sometimes where there's not enough buses at the other end or connections to get people quickly into the CBD, but I think it's always going to be an important service, not only for local residents but also for tourism. I mean, after all, our area is a major one for people from Christchurch and further afield coming for recreational opportunities. So I think it's important on both sides that it's maintained.
And Sarah, please.
Thanks so much. Really thoughtful submission. Just recognising that at the time that council starts to make the really big decisions about some of these roads, such as Gebbies, Teddington, those kind of things, we're also likely to be having conversations with other parts of the city over their roading. So when it comes to council being able to prioritise not just within Whakaropo and Kokorarata, but also with the more urban parts of the city, the open coast, Akaroa, those kind of things. How do you see that fitting in with trying to keep everything everywhere? You know what I mean? It's that how do you feel like council should be balancing that stuff up with multiple accesses for multiple communities, those kind of things?
I think, as I said earlier, I can understand the better one way than none. But I think the difference between the two routes is significant, both in terms of the time and the extra time and the extra costs that would be involved in going on the longer route. So yes, it is also a question of balancing funding for these type of things. But the amounts mentioned, and now that the extra detail has been provided, still don't seem an awful lot in terms of road construction for something that would protect our communities for the next 100 years.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, we've now come to what was a 15-minute break, but it's only 10 because we're a wee bit behind. And there's people patiently waiting up there. So we'll come back at 10 to 12, please.